Hey, I think we'll start. Hello, everyone. I hope that you can all hear me okay. That's great. So my name is Vicky Shaw, and I'm Programme Co-Director for the Transformative Innovation Policy Consortium, also known as TIPSI, and I work alongside Ed Steinmuller on learning and capacity development. So we'd like to welcome you, along with the rest of the team, to the session today, which is the third in our new Open Learning series. So TIPSI is a partnership of agencies for STI who are trying to give substance to third frame innovation policy. And our core members come from Finland, Colombia, South Africa, Norway and Sweden. And we also have associate members in China, Ghana, Kenya and Senegal. And together,
well, we seem we lost Vicky, so she was introducing TIPSI. Welcome everyone. Meanwhile, while we wait for her to come back, I have just
hello.
Yes, Vicky, we're having issues with your connection, but I think you're back now.
Oh, are you? Okay. Am I breaking up?
You were, but now
let me try turning my camera off. Now I seem back. Okay. Just shout again, Caetano, if there's any problems. Thank you. So this Open Learning series is meant to be a space, a global space for learning and for networking. And it was really good to see we have participants for this session registered from 37 countries, ranging from Canada to Nepal to Rwanda, so all over the world. So we hope that they will give rise to new connections and new thinking about transformation. So we'll have three types of sessions: theoretical foundations, introducing some of the key concepts, exploratory sessions that are more participatory, and this type of session, which we're calling insights, to consider fresh knowledge or learnings. And the session today will be led by Caetano Penna, who just introduced himself, who's Senior Research Fellow at our coordinating partner, the Utrecht Centre for Global Challenges. And in just a moment, he will introduce the programme and the panel. But before he does that, I'd just like to introduce and thank our digital coordinator, Francisco Dominguez, who's on hand to help if you have any technical problems. So you can message him through the chat. Secondly, we are experimenting today with a live Spanish audio feed. So please bear with us if there are any problems. And if you want to hear the session in Spanish, please click the interpretation button and choose Spanish. And if you want to hear the session in English, you don't have to do anything. If you want to tweet about the session, you can use the hashtag Open Learning Series, just Open Learning Series. And finally, although this session is not as participatory as some of the others, we do want to provide some opportunities to connect. So as the session starts, please do introduce yourself in the chat and perhaps explain why you have an interest in this theme for today. So without any further things from me, I will now hand over to Caetano Penna.
Thank you, Vicky, and welcome everyone. To begin with, just to introduce a bit more of myself, I'm besides a research fellow at Utrecht University, I'm also an adjunct professor at the Federal University of Rio de Janeiro. This weekend they asked me to always reinforce that, my institution affiliation, so it's important. I'm currently on leave, but I'm very happy to contribute also to the Federal University of Rio de Janeiro. I'm working with this theme of mission-oriented policy for about 6 or 7 years. I have written a report on the Brazilian innovation system and the prospect of transforming it into a mission-oriented innovation system. And currently, I'm also working with the idea of transformative missions. And today's focus of this event is precisely on this relationship between missions and transformations, and whether they are the transformative innovation policy is similar or different than mission-oriented policy. What are the similarities or differences between them? Whether the idea of moonshot missions, as we draw inspiration from in the current mission-oriented policies, are similar to the type of societal transformations that we seek today. and also whether the type of more technological or industrial types of missions are still relevant, and how do we promote them and implement them, how to design and implement them. So today with me, I have three distinguished guests. The first person that will speak today is Ralf Lindner, the head of Department of Policy and Society at the Fraunhofer Institute for Systems and Innovation Research, Germany. The second person is Philippe Larue, policy analyst at the Science and Technology and Innovation Directorate of the OECD. And the third, we have Eli Karjalainen, I'm sorry if I mispronounced it, Senior Director of Strategic Insight of Business Finland. And we are also promoting a bit more of interaction through the use of an online platform called Mentimeter. And it's a very straightforward way of using it. You simply enter www.menti.com and enter the code that is copied on the chat, or you click on the link. And later you will see some questions that you can answer, and we will discuss those questions. And also, finally, you will be able to add some of your own questions to this event. So without further ado, I will invite, please, Ralf to the stage, and welcome again. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much, Caetano, and thank you to the TIPSY Consortium for hosting this event, and particularly I'm very thankful that you invited me. I'm very much looking forward to the discussions today and the exchanges we will have. I was particularly struck also by the briefing that was provided beforehand, and I think it was in the second paragraph where it was flagged out how important it is to think about the implications of mission-oriented policies for policy making and policy implementation, and this is also something I would like to talk about today. Just briefly to what I'm bringing to the table here today at Fraunhofer ISI, we are currently working on a number of projects dealing with mission-oriented innovation policy, and particularly related to things such as systems transformation. And what I'll talk about today mainly draws on an ongoing project. It's a scientific support action in the context of the German high-tech strategy, which is, for those who don't know that, it's kind of an umbrella strategy for the federal government. And in the current version of the strategy, the federal government defined 12 different missions. And so we are at the Institute, we're supporting that the process of implementing this strategy. And of course, that helped us to gain a couple of insights to mission-oriented policy. Maybe to start with, a few words on how mission-oriented innovation policy can be related to the broader developments in science, technology, and innovation policy and its analysis. In my understanding, mission-oriented policy is, at least that's what how I would read it, is nested in kind of this ongoing paradigm shift in science, technology, innovation policy we can observe since about 10 to 15 years now, according to which that innovation policy and research policy are called upon to actively address the grand societal challenges. And previously, and of course still today, this is very much the case, but previously SDI policy was mainly targeted at fixing market failures and systemic failures. And now more and more innovation policies are geared towards contributing to solving societal problems. And this can be called maybe as a kind of a normative turn, or maybe a turn towards explicit directionality in the research and innovation policy. And I would argue that the rise of mission-oriented policies we are observing since a couple of years now can be seen as a response to the fact that these grand societal challenges are just too grand to be meaningfully and effectively addressed by policy in such a way that real change can be organized and achieved. And so a much more targeted approach was needed. And this is probably the reason why mission orientation has become so popular in the last 3 years. Now, I don't have a fixed definition of mission-oriented innovation policy I would like to share with you here, but maybe a couple of elements that I would think are important, and those of you who have already dealt with mission orientation are probably quite familiar with these issues. First of all, I guess it is important to note that missions are, at least in the understanding I have, are a translation of grand challenges into doable problems. That has been cited and written in many reports and publications. Missions are based on clear and measurable goals, including intermediate steps and well-defined timeframes. That's another important characteristic. They clearly reach beyond mere scientific breakthroughs or mere technological solutions, but focus on contributions to broader transformations, including the way systems function and also including behavioral changes. They are cross-cutting in nature, meaning that they span different sectors, policy domains, departmental boundaries. In short, they are much broader than science, technology, innovation policy used to be. And thus they are highly complex, involving a broad range of different actor types. And they not only require involvement, but actually real mobilization of a broad range of actor groups and stakeholder groups. Maybe a few words on the implications I see that are necessary for successful transformative mission policy. Now, following this dedicated mission approach, this has a number of implications for policymaking that in my understanding, have not fully been acknowledged yet by many governments and mission owners out there that use this label of mission orientation. But on the level of policymaking and its implementation, I have the feeling that these implications haven't really been fully understood yet. And maybe a helpful way of dealing with the complexity of the challenges associated with policymaking and implementation of mission orientation is to conceptualize mission orientation as multiple translation processes. So each translation step has a number of specific conditions and requirements that need to be taken into account. And actually, we would argue we see mainly 3 translation steps. And the first one, and probably the most crucial step in this whole thing, would be the actual definition of the mission. So what mission are we actually looking for? So that this is the process of translating a certain societal challenge into a concrete mission. And the second crucial translation step would be the mission design itself. So that's translating the mission goals into a set of instruments, programs, governance approaches, and activities. And it's all about finding the appropriate policy mix in this step. And the third step would then be the actual mission implementation. And this is all about the rollout and the execution of the mission design, and which also should include measures to monitor and measure the impact of these activities. While this 3-step approach serves the purpose of breaking down the complexity of policymaking and implementation, in reality, of course, and this is important to note, these 3 steps are strongly interrelated and dynamically influence each other. So it's more an analytical separation in these 3 steps. In reality, I guess this would become quite difficult to unmingle these 3 steps. Now, turning to the implications of mission-oriented policies for policy making, what needs to be taken into account, I propose basically 4 challenges or requirements that seem to be essential. The first one would be that strategic processes in selecting the problem to be addressed and defining the mission is really key. And that's something we can observe in a number of countries, and particularly in Germany. Such a very systematic strategy process has often been lacking, and I would argue such that due to the complexity of the missions, this would be really important to exercise before you actually start with implementing a mission. And of course, there's the broad range of coordination and governance issues that need to be taken care of. The third area would be to ensure mechanisms of learning and reflexivity, because we also see that in the course of as missions evolve and develop, sometimes goals need to be adjusted, sometimes conditions change, and the mission implementation process needs to be designed in a way that it is responsive to these changes. And last not least, it is absolutely key to ensure high levels of legitimacy of this mission-oriented policy by the means of deliberation, of serious participation of a broad set of stakeholders, and of course also serious communication activities on the side of the mission owners to really spell out what is being done, why it is being done, and all these things. I can't deep dive for now due to time reasons, but maybe just some key takeaways that we have so far in our project in this scientific support action of the German case. Now, first of all, we would say that it is really important for mission owners, particularly for ministries in charge of mission-oriented innovation policy, to think about that mission-oriented policy requires a new way of policy making, and you can just not carry on the way you did before. So there are a lot of changes needed in the actual practices of policy making. That will be one thing that I think is important. The next one is that impact actually starts with design. The early phase of any mission policy seems to be crucial for its later success. Thus, it is really worthwhile to think about how a strategic policy process can be set up at the very beginning of a mission policy. Another point would be to think about appropriate modes of coordination and governance arrangements in order to address these coordination challenges that arise when you are serious about implementing the missions. In our view, most of the established coordination mechanisms are not sufficient to solve these coordination challenges. It is also very important, as it's strongly related, of course, to the coordination challenges, to ensure that those who are in charge with implementing the missions and the mission owners, that they have sufficient capacities to actually deal with these challenges. So that can be simply person power. In many cases, we see that the departments in charge of a mission just do not have enough people working on these issues. And then sometimes they're completely overwhelmed with all the tasks that need to be done. And getting back to this issue of legitimacy, I think mission-oriented policy has to be very serious about involving the stakeholders you need in order to make a mission successful. This is also something we sometimes observe that it seems to be more on the level of labels. Yes, we are participatory, but zooming into the actual processes, there's not much involvement going on, and this again has implications, I would argue, for the legitimacy and the buy-in of the actors you need to be successful in your mission policy. I'll leave it right there at this point. I hope I didn't take too much time, Gaetano. And
no, thank you, Rolf. It was very thorough, I think, and actually raised to me in my mind lots of questions and ideas to follow up. But I think that the key aspect is the difference between those old type of missions and the new ones, in that they were really straightforward what we wanted to achieve in the past. So we wanted to land in the moon. So landing on the moon, if we landed, then yes, and every phase to explore the space, put someone in orbit and so on, was really tangible in the sense that we could really say, yes, that was achieved, mission accomplished. But right now we don't. It's a problem that needs to be translated. And I think that this translation process is, as you say, key. And it's not as if you translated in the beginning and everything is solved. No, in every stage you have to move on. And the other aspect that I highlight in the briefing note that also was available in the registration, it's the diffusion of the results. So it's not just about proving the concept, a technical concept is viable, but also that it will be used and substitute for old technologies. And this creates a totally different problem than before, when the technologies, they were not meant to be used by civil society. We are using them now, but they were not meant to. And that poses really a different problem. I want to leave you with a question for you to reflect, which is who does the translation, and whether the person, or like those who are doing the translation, change along the process. But think about that and then we can come back to it. And now I invite Philippe Lahue, who is studying a lot of the current missions. So Philippe, what do you see out there?
Okay, thank you very much, Caetano, and thank you all for inviting me. So the way OECD, we started that project on mission-oriented innovation policy back in 2019, and the way we address it like we do when a new type of policy challenge or a new policy approach arrives. So we do that building on what makes, I think, the strengths of OECD, which is these continuous interactions between the analytical capacity of the staff and the proximity we have with policymakers, who you know are part of our different, we have a whole pyramids and infrastructure of bodies, of committees where the different representatives of the different countries participate. They feed us with their challenge, with information on their practices. We process all that, we compare, we measure, and then we provide them with a vision, organized vision of that with best practices, also with recommendations. So we've been building on that to approach mission-oriented policy work like we do usually. So what we've done is that first, the objective of the project was to provide those policymakers with, in very simple terms, a better understanding of what mission-oriented innovation policy are and can do, what are the challenges, what are the opportunities, if there are any practices that we can find, group of practices that we can formalize, and that we have done, again, both conceptually and practically, and I will explain a bit that. So conceptually and on the ground. So as I said, the project started in 2019 and we delivered some results. After 2 years, we worked through with Biennium at the end of 2020, at the beginning of this year. So the first thing we've done during the first 6-9 months, it's to develop an analytical framework that we would use during the whole project. Some of you may have seen that project because now it's been published. You can go on the OECD website and look for mission-oriented policy. You will find case studies and you will find the report. You can also find all the data that what I'm presenting today is based on what we call the mission-oriented innovation policy. So the MOIP. It's not very nice. The MOIP online policy toolkit. If you Google that, you will find that, and you have something like 20-25 very thorough case studies of different initiatives. So what we've done is to define, and here I won't repeat what Ralph very clearly said. We have the same definition. All that is very, as we say, Matsukato compatible. Those type of coordinate, challenge-based, coordinated package of regulatory and policy measures to address a given challenge, time-bound, crossing all boundaries or silos, policy fields, disciplines and sectors and the like. And the way, maybe something that I may add to what Ralph said, is that the way we deal with this definition is that we say none of what we have been looking at on the ground, on the field, match that definition. You will find it's a lot of requirements. And if you look, they all miss something. They all have, well, not all, some of them have part of that and they become what we call mission-oriented innovation policy, but many of them don't tick all boxes. So some will be very, you know, have clear targets, but it's not very holistic. Some we have, etc., etc. Always you have a trade-off. So the way we approach mission-oriented policy is really through some kind of what we call a flexible and open approach. We have a set of requirements, and we can position the different mission-oriented policy initiatives that we can observe in this multidimensional space. And to do that, we have further refined our definition, and we have translated that definition in what we call the MOIP design principles. So across, I won't go in through that, but through the 3 dimensions, which are the same, that the translation dimension of Ralph, more or less: strategic orientation, policy coordination, programming, the heart of the core, the heart of the beast, where the coordination, the governance machinery is, and then the implementation. You always find those 3 stages. Sometimes you have a 4th one if you go down to the level of performance, but it's always the same thing. And within each of these 3 dimensions, you have design requirements. If you are defining the mission in the strategic orientation, you want it to be legitimate. So one of the design requirements is legitimacy, and Ralph already highlighted that. You want directionality. You want intentionality, meaning that you want that to be defined, translated into targets. Not only a broad challenge, it's targets, and you want that with milestones, etc. So we have developed 12 design principles. In the coordination, you have horizontality for horizontal coordination, etc., etc. So we have those design principles, and we've been using that really to map. We have looked at what is on the ground. We have checked, we have identified some of those initiatives in different countries that match the definition, and then we have tried to position, and we have mapped their practices within each of those design requirements. So that means that we have looked at what we call the how-to questions. How do you strengthen legitimacy around a bold and ambitious goals and mission? How do you define missions with stakeholders? How you coordinate horizontally? How you coordinate vertically? This is all in the report. We have mapped the different practices that we have observed, and then of course when we have observed that diversity, because as you can expect, there are a lot of diversity in doing that. Then we have typologized those different. We have bundled together groups of practices that are more or less similar. So you have different ways to define missions. You have what we call more or less, I'm sorry, Ellie, that might be a bit simplistic, but the Nordic way of defining missions. You will tell us whether there is a Nordic way, but it is very participatory, kind of bottom-up, building with stakeholders, with ecosystems of stakeholders that are going to themselves define the mission agenda behind the missions, and then the state. We see that a lot with Vinnova, but Business Finland, I believe, is with the growth engines and all that, and it is also part of that story. You will tell us, Ellie, much better than I do. So we have done that. Then what we have done also, we've done in-depth. You will tell me, Caetano, when I really cross the line in terms of time, because without slides, I'm free here.
Please, if you can sum up in 1 minute now, and then.
Yes. Okay. So what we've done as well, these were the across-the-board type of exploration. Then what we have done is more in-depth case studies in 4 countries. And the basic assumption that I'm sure you will agree with, this is not a challenging one, is that all those mission-oriented innovation policy initiatives are embedded in a national setting. You don't do mission-oriented policy in Japan as you do in Norway. So we have defined that concept of national mission-oriented policy trajectories, and we try to define that trajectories looking at where do they come from. None of those initiatives are built from scratch. They are, and of course the high-tech strategy Ralph mentioned existed before, and the Dutch top sectors as well, but also in Norway, Pilot E from RCN build on what they've been doing in those large-scale programs and all that. So you have to understand where they come from to understand where they could go, and we have provided recommendations as what could be the next step for those mission-oriented policy trajectories, and I thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Philip. I think it's fascinating, this work that you've done. And I wanted also to leave you with a question for reflection, which is, you say you found out 12 design principles. So how to design the policies. Of course, you have a range of different policies. But then do you have any recommendation or any insight about let's say, the capacities and capabilities of those who are leading the process, especially in the public sector. So what do you need? If I'm a innovation agency who want to experiment, what do I need to have and should look for developing that so that I can design this? So what are the kinds of capabilities that we need? But without further ado, that's for later when we come back.
That's for later, but the response is no. So other people might have looked more closer intra-organization, but we did not. So, but I can say a word about that.
Okay, thank you. Thank you a lot. Thanks a lot. And now, Ellie, please, I expect you to give a bit of the perspective of business. Of course, Business Finland is concerned about also how to bring business to the table and how different private sector organizations, especially firms, can contribute to this mission-oriented process. And the flip side, how can these missions be contributing to the competitiveness of business? So please, welcome.
Yeah, thank you. And yeah, it was really fascinating to listen, Ralph and Felipe. Thank you for that. And it would have been very good to listen to you a bit earlier already and then kind of think about what to tell about how we are doing things in Business Finland. So this is a little bit one case now. I can't really say it so straightforward about that, how to really combine the business side here. But what we are now planning to do, we have these growth engines and some earlier activities, like Felipe said, there is no kind of open or table without activities beforehand. So we have lots of history on combining different actors together and have a kind of a little bit kind of shared vision. But now we try to build a concept which is at least a cushion for the missions and mission-oriented innovation policy in that way that we really want to build programs in that way that there is a real target which is at the societal or environmental or social part in a way, not at economic part. It's something which is not directly at Business Finland's field in a way, because our main role is anyhow to build Finnish economy and support the companies in that way. And also when we are funding research organizations, we are doing that because they are building knowledge for the private sector. So today, we want to make such of programs which are kind of, there is a really shared value. There's value at the environmental or social sector, and there is economic value. So in that way, we combine these in that way that when the topic and the target will be set in such way that it provides value to all different sectors, then it's possible to really build a coherent roadmap where the private sector has their role. They are anyhow, private sector's role is what it is. They are anyhow doing business, and that is something we want to build there as well. That's how to build a roadmap that the competitiveness in long term and the business in short term as well is at the same roadmap, because companies do need that. So with our tools in Business Finland, while we are the main funding organization for innovations, and we have export promotion as well in Business Finland and international investment. So seeking for international investments to Finland, we will use all these tools we do have to build such a roadmaps, but not only with our tools. The main thing is to make the partnerships with other stakeholders which share the same goal. For example, zero carbon society. That will be one of our pilots. We are just now kicking off very shortly, and just to how we and yeah, we still have to define actually what is the real focus, and then what is the goals and targets for this topic. But we want to then make the map about the other stakeholders and other policy sectors, roadmaps at the same thing, and find those parts where we will be kind of shared roadmap nodes, could I say, so that the share really also the activities during the roadmap. So in that way, yeah, I'm coming from the top down and bottom up at the same time, but just that the business has to find their parts, do their business, but at the same time, I'm quite positive that we can't really solve the societal challenges if the private sector is not fully in. And that is something we really now want to find the way that how we can really kind of justify these to everybody, that how the goal could be shared. So just we are at the beginning in our concept, and yes, we have looked at OECD's reports and design principles, and we will definitely use all these earlier done kind of examples about what it could be. But our stake in a way is that how to combine the private sector's activities to share the value. So so we have used, when we have defined, Ralph just said that yes, the strategy process concerning the how to really choose the topics is something very important, and that is what we now start with our two fresh of these topics. Two topics we have chosen. One of those was the zero carbon economy, but we are also starting a process to really have a kind of national process to choose the next missions, even though that we are at the starting point. But we agree that this is really something which is very strategic, because we have to find topics which can be, though the goal has can be shared by private sector and by other stakeholders as well. So I think the strategy process is really important. But anyhow, we as a Business Finland, even though that it is business for us in a way, so we seek those global challenges and those goals which really create markets for the future. So they are, yes, usually challenging, and behind those there is systemic change, but we can see that there is really a big role with the private sector, and that there is a long-term market creation going on at the same time. And so in that way, we don't wrap to every challenge, we don't wrap to every goal you can put for the SDGs, for example. We are really seeking those that way we can really see that there is shared value from economy and the other parts, social and environmental part as well. And because Finland is a tiny country, I have to say, we have to also look that there is really Finnish potential to solve these problems in both sides, in private sector and in the national sector in a way. So that is something that which limits us a little bit, that we can't really go to all global challenges, but we have to keep on those where we do have potential to really build on. So in that way, at the moment, we don't really have concrete answers yet how we will do this. But at the moment, we are defining the way. We start with 2 pilots. We have a concept, a loose concept in a way, and we build those roadmaps for these 2 pilots, and we'll also build how to measure, how to see the transformation, how to see that how actually also the market is created, because that is something which has to be in there as well. So in that way, yes, we are open case to further analysis for colleagues in this panel.
Thank you, Ellie. Yes, I think that the key message is that business needs to be part of this process because they have lots of resources, lots of assets to contribute to. And the question now is how do you motivate businesses to be part of it? And I think you showed an answer. Well, the missions, as they need to be translated and they need to be designed, they need to be translated and designed to also highlight to businesses the value that can be created if they participate. And the question, and another aspect that I think also speaks to what Philippe has said, is that each country has their own economy and their own sector. So the missions that will speak to their businesses is different. And then to you, I would like to raise a question that's a bit challenging, but whether you see some resistance from the businesses, from firms to participate in those missions, or they are really, most are willing to participate. But I'll start with the Mentimeter before we go to the discussion. Again, I ask you to enter to www.menti.com, and then you will enter this code that I'm copying again here. I'll share my screen so that I can start the presentation. I'm sorry to the Spanish speakers, the questions are in English, but you can, when the questions are open, you can reply in Spanish. Yo hablo un poquito de español, en verdad es un portuñol, so I speak a mixture of Portuguese and Spanish, and I can try to do that. So the first question that we have is for you to rate the following statements. Whether you agree, disagree, or you don't agree, they are supposed to be controversial. So mission-oriented policy is a fad that will go away soon. The second one, transformative innovation policy and mission-oriented policy are the same concept. The third one is missions are an inadequate concept for the type of transformation we need to achieve sustainability, the type of transformation we need in order to achieve sustainability. And transformative innovation without state-led coordination is an utopia. So they are supposed to be controversial. I know that's not, some will agree or not, but I will come back to Ralph. If you want to pick one of these statements to challenge them or actually to agree, and also the question that I asked you for you to reflect. So what do you think, Ralph?
Yeah, maybe first to start off with the question you posed to me at the beginning, Caetano. If I got it right, it was about who actually to involve and how in these processes of defining the mission and also the further steps. And here I would basically draw on what Philippe just said. I think we have to be very, very context sensitive here and really look at the political systems, the institutional settings we have in each country in order to be able to decide who is to be involved and also at which level. For instance, this is just an example from the German case, and I'm just pointing out this is just only the German case because not a one size fits all. We have federal elections coming up in September, and a couple of the political parties are talking about missions in their policy platforms and their programs for the elections, and so in many ways it could be the case that the actual decision which missions will become policy will be pre-decided in the context of the elections and then the parliamentary elections and then the coalition agreements that come out of that. But nonetheless, then you still have kind of a translation step to take in order to spell out what does that actually mean in terms of concrete mission design. And here, I really am convinced that it is not possible to come up with very effective mission designs without involving key actors. And Heli just spelled that out perfectly understandable. understandable. Without industry involved in this, it will be very difficult to achieve many of the missions we are seeing out there. So that is definitely the point, to involve industry, but also many other actors for that matter. And it's not only about improving the quality of the mission policies, but it's also an issue of ensuring a certain degree of commitment and buy-in. And experience shows that if people are involved already in the processes of designing, if they have a say in what will be done, the likelihood is much higher that they will be engaged in actually putting things on the ground.
Thank you, Ralph. I think that I've studied a bit the German energy transition policy, which actually was not conceived initially as a mission-oriented policy, but now we could try to study them as such. And I find interesting that a presentation from the German Development Bank, KfW, about it, and they say we use three things: the carrot, the stick, and the tambourine, like a tambour, to keep the pace. So by that I mean we give incentives, we give punishments, but we also provide services that try to coordinate, to provide coordination. And I think that also reflects a lot that you need incentives to engage businesses, but you also need to have some type of punishments for the undesirable behavior. And on top of that, you need some information services also to provide this type of coordination. But Philippe, do you think that the mission-oriented policy will go away soon? It seems that most of the audience disagree with those statements, but from what you see in the practice, is this something that will last?
So yes and no. So that's already a response. To some extent, yes, because if you look at it, you have again, there is a lot of cumulative process into these. So you have to look at where it comes from. Conceptually, those mission-oriented innovation policy are not something that come out of the blue. It is based on many things that we had before. I mean, the issue, the requirement, this imperative of stakeholder involvement was there much before. Result-based management, we had that very much in different programs, and even more in the private sector. There is something about result-based management. There is a lot of evolutionary economics. So conceptually, it was coming not from nowhere. And as I said, now, in practice, most of those those new initiatives are based on previous cumulative learning and previous initiatives. So just like they don't come out of nowhere, they won't stay as they are. So the term mission-oriented policy might dilute itself, but in many ways, it won't disappear totally. I'm pretty sure that some of those requirements, if you look at with a much closer, greater level of granularity, some of those new aspects or more pronounced aspects will still be there. Again, putting targets that will be, setting targets, just like Hedy mentioned, will be part of the portfolio, maybe of Business Finland, even beyond mission-oriented innovation policy. It will be maybe mainstream. I don't want to talk for Business Finland, that is just an example, but we can see already that there are some spillovers to other programs. It's not a very strictly bounded. We made it bounded because we put a label on that. We call them mission-oriented innovation policy, but in fact, it's much more diffuse. It comes from different origins, and it will mainstream in different origins. It will spread those good practices.
Thank you, Philippe. In fact, I would like to highlight that we have this European panel today. I'm from Brazil personally, but I can say that also in Latin America, mission-oriented policy is becoming something of a trend. We have different countries and different cities also trying to implement them, like Medellin in Colombia. We have also some institutions from the federal level in Brazil also trying to do that. So that is a wave of mission-oriented policy. And I think that could build lasting capacities and type of approach to innovation policy. Ellie, so just to look at the results here, as I said, most people disagree with the first statements. The third statement's been a bit of a division between the audience. Missions are inadequate. Some tend to think it's an adequate concept, others not. But most think that the state has a coordinating role. And I would like to ask you, while I already moved to the next question, which is for people to rank these 4 statements: business engagement in policy design and implementation, to rank what is more important: business engagement in policy design and implementation, state-led governance to assure coordination, civil society participation to assure relevance and legitimacy, and scientific definition of missions. So I know that also this is very much deterministic, but please rank them while I turn to Ellie. Ellie, do you see a types of missions that could be led by businesses without the involvement of the state? Or how do you see that division of labor between business on the one hand and the public sector on the other?
Yeah, really good question and tricky one at the same time. And I was a little bit thinking about the concept, because the previous question was, but that is it a kind of short-term hype with the missions now, or is it something which is going to be ongoing? And I think that now it's quite easy to apply the concept and the kind of method to these questions we just now have, like carbon neutrality or some other global challenges. But I think there comes a tricky one, which is not so easy to apply, and because we have now all bought really the carbon neutrality in a way, and the governments have. So in that way, it is already led by government and regulation. So when the first one comes, which is not yet, so that is where we really see that, is it possible that the business itself leads the way? I don't really know, but that is perhaps in the future. But that there has to be then the shared value, and the value has to be quite high for the business side, and that all citizenship kind of targets is the same as the businesses. So I don't know, really interesting anyhow.
Thank you, Ellie. I don't know if this slide here is working, because I don't see the results. Oh, now we see the results. So we see here people have ranked the state-led governance as the most important, and then civil society participating as the second, business engagement as the third. And for the scientists, this would be less of important. Ralph, from this conceptualization that we've been working within Fraunhofer, what's the role of the science and academia in missions?
I actually like the result that we are seeing on the screen, because I largely agree with that order. And referring to your question, I would argue in the different processes of defining a mission, but also in implementing a mission, it seems to be very important for the mission owners, I would call them, to draw on a broad range of policy intelligence or strategic intelligence, if you will. And I think it is really important to make sure that you're not kind of trapped in some kind of lock-ins in terms of the information you're basing your decisions on. With regard to the role of academia and scientific policy advice in this field, I think they have, of course, a key role. For instance, in all these issues that are particularly focusing on certain sector issues. For instance, if you were talking about a mission in the mobility sector, for instance, of course you need researchers that are working in that field, and you need to draw on their expertise, that's for sure. But you also need policy expertise. For instance, if you're looking at a process of formative evaluation, which I think is also very important. You know, when you're implementing these missions, it is important to ensure that you have these learning cycles implemented. And of course, here researchers can be quite helpful in organizing such a process. So there are important roles, but I would warn just to narrow it down only to involve science and academia. I think in that case we need a broad range of perspectives.
Thank you, Ralph. I would like, actually, we have a few minutes left, and I would like to invite Anyone who would have a question to open their mic, if you want to make a statement or to raise a question, we won't be able to go through the end of this presentation because we are running out of time. So you can write the question, I can read in the chat, or if you would like to participate, please open your video and mic and please join in. Otherwise, I will go on with my... Okay, we have a question from Rodrigo. Yeah, so what was the division of labor between science, technology, and innovation in mission-oriented policies? I think you mean what's the role of scientific knowledge, the role of technological development, and of innovation policy in these mission-oriented policies. Anyone want to pick that one up? Yes, Ralph, please.
I think that's a highly interesting question, because if we look at how mission-oriented innovation policy is usually set up at the level of governments, it's normally from either the Ministry for Research and of course sometimes the ministries dealing with the economy. And particularly those countries where it goes back to the research ministries, I observe, I don't know if the others could agree, that they are struggling with the fact that if you want to be successful in your missions, you have that in many cases the role of science, research, technology development is a relative one. At least in those missions that have a very strong transformative ambition. And this means that science and technology will have a certain, of course, very important, but only a certain contribution to make to a successful mission. But other policy areas will be probably more important if you look at mobility transitions, for instance, or changing the system in the agrarian sector. So this is just one example that the relative weight of science, technology, innovation policy might be shifting compared to, let's say, previous paradigms in this field.
Thank you, Ralph. Let me interrupt you because I want to raise this next question to Philip. We have only a few minutes. Philip, in 1.5 minutes, is there a way to make mission resilient as we go through political changes? I think that's a very important question by Zida Mohammed from Malaysia. We see, especially in Latin American countries, where political changes lead to the abandonment of missions, and we know that those missions are long-term. So how can we make them resilient to political changes? Do you have any insights for us on that?
Well, that's a question that existed again much before mission-oriented innovation policy. Now, mission-oriented policy has some advantage here, is that they are usually more long-term, and they are based on not only a mission, but often a mission agenda that is multi-annual and that bind together different types of factors. So it's supposed to be, we would expect that they are more resilient. But just coming back to some of the questions you had about how to define a good missions, how to govern a good missions, etc. Just wanted to say that in the end, beyond all definition that we can have, those missions, the way I see those policy more and more is that they are platform, they are vehicles for collective action. So it's really a way within for a given problem, for a given target, actors can define the missions, set the right governance and the right policy mix of instruments and resources to tackle that problem. So there is no one best way. It's really, it's the machinery which had the best way. The best mission is the one that come out of that process.
Thank you, Philip. Earlier, I saw that you made a comment in the chat. If you want to elaborate before I pass on to Vicky to close our session. Ralph, I thank you. Again, we are running out of time, but Ali, please, you said that if business models would consist of other values than profits, then maybe coordination on private side could be possible. That's a very strong statement. Could you briefly elaborate for us?
Yeah, this is really out of the box thinking, because I think in some cases we are going on that direction, that yeah, there are also other values than only kind of money or that kind of profit is there really counted. And in that way, if the development goes to that direction, then I see a much stronger role of the private sector in leading the missions as well. So.
Thank you very much. Leandro, I'm sorry we won't be able to answer your question about collaboration, but I believe that for certain global issues, we will need a model of collaboration. So this is something that we will have to reflect on. Thank you for your question. Vicky, please.
Thank you, Caetano, and thank you to all of our panel. I can really feel a lot of energy and excitement about the discussion, and it sounds like people would probably like to talk a bit more. So maybe this is something that we might be able to revisit again later in the Open Learning series. But for today, I just wanted to close by thanking everyone. Thank you for attending, and thank you for joining us to speak, everyone. And interestingly, Ralph mentioned the importance of formative evaluation in relation to working on missions. And we didn't pay him, but next week we do have a session on formative evaluation. So I thought it would be a good opportunity to just let people know what we'll be doing there. And I'll just share my screen if you bear with me one moment. So I'm having problems sharing my screen for some reason, so forget that. But next week we have on Tuesday a session on formative evaluation, and I think we have Sandra Bonney here today and her colleague Jordi from Ingenio, who will be sharing how do we know if a set of policy experiments are actually contributing to systemic transformation. So that should be a really interesting session. It's longer, it's going to be a little bit different in format. But if you'd like to join us for that, then please visit the TIPSI website. If you search for Open Learning Series at TIPSI, and you can book on for that session. But for now, I think it's time to say farewell, but we will leave the session open for a few minutes. So if anyone wants to share any contact details or any last comments, we'll be open for a while before we close. Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Vicky. I think that the mission was accomplished. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.